Hello everyone, and welcome to day 9, reading through 1st and 2nd Kings, today chapter 17 and 18. A brief recap: both the northern and southern kingdoms suffered wicked kings, with the exception of Asa. Anyway, we left off with the reflective question: is God going to do anything to intervene? Is he going to raise a good king? Is he going to raise a prophet, a Samuel, or a Nathan? And the answer to this is yes. And we come now here to chapter 17. And here is the well-known Elijah. Elijah is going to go to Ahab, the king, the husband of Jezebel, confronts him, tells him there's going to be no rain. And no rain means that the water supply is going to diminish. And of course, the food supply is going to diminish as well, as in an agrarian society, the planted crops are not going to produce well at all. Elijah, however, is going to be fed and have water until the brook dries. And then he's going to go to the Sidonian territory, which is where Jezebel happens to be from, and he's going to see a widow there. And he's going to ask her for something to drink and something to eat. And here this widow is with her son, and all she's got is just a little bit of flour and oil left. She was going to make some bread out of that, fix it, eat it, and then prepare to die because the food was over. Elijah solicits this from her. I tell you what, you fix me this bread, and let's see what happens. She makes him the bread, the cake. He eats it, and this woman suddenly has enough flour and oil, and she never runs out. It's indefinitive, and so she continues to have bread and oil for the rest of her life. And then her son gets sick and dies. She's afraid that the prophet has done this, but instead what the prophet does is resurrect here this son. So in our introduction here to Elijah, already he is a stark contrast between any prophet that we've seen. Samuel served as something of a prophet, but Elijah is already surpassing things that Samuel has done. Nathan was a prophet, however, a little more obscure. But here this, in a literary way, putting this story here to introduce the prophet Elijah is a way of bright flashing lights to say, pay attention to this guy. He is going to be significant. He is unique and even contrasts from the kings, the recent kings that we've read about who were evil, and he already seems a little different than everybody since we started the reading in 1 Samuel. And so now that we have this basis for this character of Elijah, now let's find out what he's going to do. Chapter 18 is the 3rd year of the famine. I have said this before. The 3rd year of a famine marks 3 throughout Scripture is a number representing the superlative. And 3, when it comes to famines, represents the point of no return, as it were. After the first year of famine, people would tighten their belts, They would live exceptionally tight. After that, some of the food supplies would be gone into. After a second year of famine, people have um, gone into the reserves. It's near about emptied out, the reserves. And then in the third year, the reserves get emptied out. And if there's no rain by the end of that third season, the starvation and malnutrition just escalates to tremendous categories. So it's at that point, God sends Elijah. God is going to send the rain, but first he's going to send Elijah there to Ahab. And here he meets this character, Obadiah, who works for Ahab. However, is a good person. Evidently, Jezebel had been killing the prophets, and Obadiah took and hid 100 of them. Ahab's going to send Obadiah out to try to find some places where there is water and grass for some livestock to graze. And he's going to run across Elijah. And Obadiah is a good man, and he's going to give honor to Elijah. And Elijah says, go back to Ahab and tell him that Elijah has returned. Obadiah is afraid to do so because if he comes back, it says that Elijah's in town, but he hasn't brought Elijah to Ahab. Obadiah is afraid for his own life. Elijah gives him reassurance. There is going to be an honor challenge that occurs now. Elijah is going to meet up with Ahab. Ahab asks why Elijah has brought this drought on the people. Elijah is going to remind Ahab that this was the doing of the kings, the wickedness of the leadership. And in the collectivistic societies, they would get this. And in the culture of which I'm speaking in an individualistic culture, we tend to try to separate people and people's actions and people's consequences. However, in collectivistic cultures, there's just not quite that distinction. And most certainly when it comes to a leader, there's going to be group consequences because of the king. The entire people are suffering. So Elijah's honor challenge goes like this. He's going to provoke them to bring 850 prophets up to Mount Carmel. They are going to take a bull, which at this point, bulls are probably becoming a little more rare. People have been eating in the food supplies, the reserves, and they probably were eating the bulls before the bulls died of starvation. But Elijah is going to tell them, put a bull on an altar, and Elijah is going to do the same. So you've got 2 altars with 2 bulls on it. The first challenge is for these 850 false prophets to pray to their gods to call down fire and ignite the altar and burn up the sacrifice. And of course, they pray and try to invoke their God, but are unsuccessful. They become so desperate, they start mutilating themselves, these false prophets. They begin to cut themselves. So then it's Elijah's turn. And he's going to have them take precious water and just drench the altar. This is dramatic. This is great. Pour water all over the altar. Nobody expects except Elijah, for the flames to ignite on this altar. But don't you know that God sends the fire down? The sacrifice begins to burn. And so with this capital, Elijah then demands that the false prophets are killed. And then there's this hint of a rain cloud, and now rain is coming to the land. And so with this, At this point here, uh, they're going through some suffering. The people, the drought because of leadership, the famine. However, God sends the prophet in time. And so one wonders, a reflective question now going forward is how much good can Elijah do? What kind of impact? He's juxtaposed here to Ahab and Jezebel by default, I guess the archetypal wicked king and queen. And what can Elijah do? What will he do? Will things begin to turn around now that there's a godly alpha character in this story? Until next time.